All right, folks, welcome to another edition of the Rough Cuts Instagram and YouTube live vintage hobby chat show. This I think is going to be, this is our year end episode. We want to do a little bit of a recap of the hobby year, as at least as perceived through the vintage mindset. I'm happy to have I'm really glad that we're able to get a bunch of people to join us over Instagram and YouTube. The experience on YouTube is higher quality than the experience on Instagram. So if you are joining us on Instagram, I would encourage you to hop on over to YouTube if you can. Also want to shout out, the people who've, this show is kind of funny in the sense that, we do it kind of like when we're able, which averages out to something like, once a month or so, something like that. And I know that that's like non-standard in kind of hobby, podcasts and whatnot. But I think, in the vintage community, we tend to do things a little bit more on our own time. And the hobby isn't this fast-paced grind. At least it certainly isn't for me. And I think for us, with our schedules and stuff, it just works out that we think we can give you a better product if we kind of wait and do things over this kind of like time scale. As frustrating as it is for people like Publius, I think it's the right call for us. So I want to see, seeing some folks already in the chat. We've got TJ is online. Our buddy has joined us and claimed the first spot in the chat. We've also got Publius calling us out right away for, what did he say here? He says, 2 episodes a year and still can't start on time, shaking my head. Yeah, that's kind of how it's going to go around here. Snilly. But it'll be fun. I think we're going to have a fun chat tonight. So let's see. So kind of what we're going to do is a few different topics. What we were going to plan to do was start with a discussion of our kind of 3 favorite pickups of 2024, kind of do it round robin style, kind of keep it a little bit faster paced. And then we were going to do kind of 2 different variations on kind of a 2024 recap. First one being, we were kind of going to go through, well, for each of us, what were some of the kind of high level hobby developments overall in the vintage hobby. So we'll hit upon a few nice things there. Oh, we got Jeremy Lee joining us. Hey, Jeremy, thanks.
What's up, Jeremy?
Yeah. All right. Then we were going to talk about make it a little bit more personalized. What were some of the we look back on 2024, aside from those kind of high level events, what has been updated in our experience this year as compared to 2023, and then round it off, with our usual recent pickups and stuff like that. So, but before we get into kind of the topics at hand, I want to do some quick shout outs for some really recent hobby content that I think is really worth other people checking out. So number one, wanted to shout out Tony, Southern Collector 14. He's got a YouTube channel where he's much more on it than us. He does a video a week. And right before Christmas, I think on Christmas Eve, he had an episode about Lou Gehrig and his kind of personal connection to Lou Gehrig. One of my favorite kind of hobby content I've consumed in the entire year, and I highly encourage people to check that out, especially if you're a big Lou Gehrig fan. So that's pretty cool. We also had both of you guys joined Jeremy Lee's his spin-off podcast on vintage. I forget what's the name of it, Jonathan? The name of the show?
I think it's the Vintage Showcase. It's with Layden Sheldon and Jeremy Lee, and yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so both of you guys were on that. I think that you guys both did a fantastic job of kind of highlighting a lot of the shared approach that we have to the vintage hobby. I thought that was super well done. Also wanted to shout out Iowa Dave. Yeah, Vintage Spotlight. There you go. Thanks, Jeremy.
There it is.
Also wanted to shout out Iowa Dave. He recently did the series of podcasts that was called 27 Decisions in November, which was kind of like a 15-minute little podcast that was a conversation with people in the hobby about kind of a key decision that they made or maybe didn't make that kind of had a big impact on their overall collecting kind of trajectory. And I thought that was really well done. and I highly encourage people to check it out. I think Jeremy was on it. I was on it. It was super fun. Very, very good time. All right. So that being said, let's dive into the topic at hand. So first topic we're gonna do is favorite pickups of 2024. We're gonna do a round robin style, and we're gonna start with you, my man, Jonathan. What's the first pickup that you want to share from
All right.
2024?
All right. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year to all you guys. I'm joining from my mom's office in Ohio. So you see a different background here. So I'm some of these pickups, because I didn't travel to Ohio with all of these cards, are going to be pictures on my phone. But this was the year I came into this year saying I'm really close to being finished with my golden age collecting goals. And once I achieved that, I was ready to dive into pre-war cards and tobacco cards in particular. Without further ado, this was what the card I identified as the first T206 card I wanted to get. It's the Cy Young, where his glove is showing. Got one with really, we'll call it honest, rounded corner wear. And I picked this up at the National in Cleveland, and I've been enjoying it ever since. So that's number 3 on my
That
on my
that one was the one you got in a trade, right? Did you outright buy that one, or you traded, right?
It was predominantly trade. I had a really high grade 61 tops Mickey Mantle card, which why do you need that card in a high grade? So I turned that card and a little bit of cash into this beauty right here.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to shout out TJ is online said that is the Milkman card, and I can see that. You know, when you look at the card, he does. You know, he's a badass pitcher, but he kind of looks like a milkman there for sure.
I love it.
Yeah, that was a great pickup, Jonathan. I was excited when you got that one. I know you've really kind of taken your time and been very deliberate about your approach to the tobacco and candy cards from the pre-war era. And
Yeah.
I think that was a really nice and beautiful step down that rabbit hole, and look forward to seeing how you keep going down it.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot more to find there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move over to you, Nate. What's the first one you want to share?
Yeah. Well, yeah, first, just welcome everyone, and great intro, Matthew. And I'm glad, December for me is usually kind of my least involved month in the hobby. So I'm particularly excited to be doing this tonight and seeing some folks, with the holidays, and been really busy with work these past few weeks and stuff. So I haven't been really consuming any content or having as many conversations or following auctions and stuff as much as normal. So it's great to be back in the thick of it, and good to see you guys, and good to see our buddies in the chat. So just wanted to say that first of all. And then, yeah, I like that we're starting off with our key pickups of the year. A lot of times we save our pickups toward the end of the show, but I think jumping right in and showing some good cards, and, especially the cards we're most excited about from this year, is a nice way to start off our year-end episode here with a bang. And I'm actually, as I do sometimes when we do these round robins, I'm going to start off by cheating a little bit and showing 2 of them that are sort of related. So I picked just cards I have in hand, and I wasn't able to kind of get everything, but I think these were pretty good indicators of my favorites of the year. So these are two cards from 1954, and that's the related thing. And, obviously 2 of the better sort of known and popular guys to collect from the golden era. I have a 54 a 54 Red Heart Mickey Mantle PSA 6, and a 54 Johnston Cookies Hank Aaron SGC 3.5. And these are both cards, especially the Aaron, that I had wanted for a while, and tracked several of them, and I got them pretty close together this past year. I think it was kind of April, May timeframe, and it was interesting because this card I had wanted, really badly. You guys know, is at the top of my list for, toward the top for a couple of years, and just struggled to find the right example. And I ended up, I usually have pretty good discipline, but I think I overpaid a little bit for this one. But I don't mind. Sometimes it's have to. You do.
Yeah, or when you found the example you wanted, you had to jump on it, right? That's how.
Yeah, exactly. But it's it's a really nice 3.5, and I'm happy with it. It's a tough card to find, and of these 2, I would give up the Mantle before I'd give up the Aaron. So if I truly had to decide, this one would probably be, the Aaron would be third. But this one was, so they're tied together because the Aaron was maybe one of my, and from a value standpoint, least good buys of the year, but I think this was maybe my best buy of the year. So this one I got on a golden auction, and it was one of those ones that kind of slipped through, and it ended up. So it got the E sticker. It's really nicely centered after after I submitted it, after I'd gotten it, and I paid about kind of, I think, like 60% of the price of what I've seen some PSA 5 E's going for. Wow. And this is a 6, and it actually like kind of looks nicer than those. So I don't have a great 6 comp, but I feel like I really, did I feel like every year you kind of get one or two of those that's like a really good deal, and then you feel even a little bit better about the card after that. So,
totally.
it's 254s, which, it was maybe one of the best years for cards ever. There were so many, these two sets. You've got the Wilson Franks, the Tops, the Bowman, the is it Redman or
the Redman tobacco?
The tobacco set. Like, so many great sets that year. Maybe drafting off the popularity caused by the 52 Top set, but a couple that I really like here.
Yeah, the Bowman set that year was also pretty spectacular. Largely kind of underrated, but really nice cards in there. I did want to make a comment too on the Aaron cookie card. You said that, I think it's right now, it seems like it's a card you're looking at and you love, and there's like a piece of it that's like, oh, I overpaid. Oh, dang. I feel like, when we're doing this a year from now, you're going to be like, I'm so glad I overpaid for that card, right? It's like one of those things where like, I feel like when I've overpaid for cards, there are moments where I'm like kind of kicking myself, but the ones I kick myself more are the ones where I got a good deal on a card that didn't look, exactly as what I wanted it.
Great point. Yeah, totally agree with that. Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. What you got, Matthew?
All right. So I'm bringing to the stage a T206 Ty Cobb bat off card as my first one here. So this card and I have a bit of a history in the sense that this is the third example I've owned. Jonathan has the previous one, and then the one previous to that was in the Flipper Vortex somewhere. There you go. And this is a card that was like most of my collecting actually, like so much have been dominated by kind of regathering or refocusing my collection after the big trade for the Mickey Mantle in February of 2023. And so at that time, I gave up a really nice old mill red portrait Ty Cobb in that trade. And part of the reason I made that choice was because I had already decided that like the Ty Cobb that I needed to have in my collection was the bat off, because I just fell in love with the color. I kind of fell in love with the, he's got that like, whatever it's called, 10-mile kind of stare. It just looks like classic Cobb, like super high intensity guy. And I just like love the color. And then, I went on this, I get really picky about registration and things like that. And so I, went through a series of examples to kind of find the one that finally spoke to me. So it was like, I moved that red portrait in February of 2023, and I finally kind of sealed my collecting goal with respect to Ty Cobb, in, I think it was June or July of 2024. So, this was like a long kind of trajectory to kind of track down the example that was just right for me. And Litzy Sports Cards shouts out and says the sunset is gorgeous. Yeah, definitely agree with that. I love that you can see like the chimney, like the smokestacks in the background there. It's just such a classic card. And this was a big deal for me in 2024.
I will vouch for your copy by saying this: under any magnification level, that card is not blurry. It is the most crisp image you will find of Ty Cobb with the bat off.
Yeah, it's a really nice card. And just shout out Jeremy saying it's really beautiful. And Mookie Chilson says Matthew's what does he say here? Yeah, Matthew's collecting journey after the 52 mantle snap is fun. Yep, it's defined my whole collecting over the past time, almost 2 years now. So that was the one I wanted to share. So all right,
and Matthew, I feel like with that card, you more than with any other, you kind of gave free rein to your tendencies around the necessity for perfect registration. Right? Like that was what really kind of motivated some of the turnover with those cards that you had. And yeah, you ended up settling with just an unbelievable example. And so you talk about that being your Ty Cobb representative in your collection. Could you see yourself adding another one in addition to that, or do you feel like that's the one and you're good?
That's a great question, Nate. I mean, if I had the funds and the wherewithal, I would love to get a Cracker Jack because I think that card just looks amazing. I would like to get another red portrait because I think of the red portrait as like the 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. of 1909, and like that's the card that all the kids were chasing, and I really would like to get another one of those someday, but I've got like a laundry list of stuff to get, right, and it's definitely on there, but further down. But the Cracker Jack Cobb is like, I think that's just I love that card. I know Tony, Southern Collector, he's got one that's just really nice. And we didn't settle for a 1915.
Yeah, right. Maybe that'll be the next card you'll do a big trade and reset for. Who knows, right?
Maybe. I don't know if I would ever has no fortitude to do that again, but it's that baby.
Right.
All right.
All right. Back to you, Jonathan.
Ladies and gentlemen, the spontaneity of a live podcast. I'm going to change it up because I'm not showing my Cobb after Matthew just showed his Cobb. So I have a different card in hand. Instead of showing the front of it, I'm just going to start by hitting the serial number because for folks who have followed the show, Matthew on our overrated segment said that serial numbered 90s Jordans were overrated. So here you go. Number 97 out of 250.
It was even broader. It was all serial number 90s cars.
Oh, it wasn't just Jordans?
No, I love Jordan.
This is my 97 Flair. I've shown this on the show before. This is my 97 Flair Showcase Rose Zero, which I finally snagged this year. It's a gem mint looking PSA 7. I'm actually thinking about sending it back in for the review service. The reason I have this card physically here in Ohio with me is through a friend of my brother-in-law, actually a guy who works with him. He learned that like a very serious Jordan collector. So this is like somebody who probably has like the jambalaya insert and, you know, like some of the really, really big Jordan cards, lives here in Columbus. And we're going to meet with him tomorrow. And so my brother-in-law said, bring your best Jordans. He's seen your Instagram. So I brought a few of my best, and I finally picked this one up in 2024 after a long hunt for it. So I'm excited. I'll report back next time and see what Jordans I get to see tomorrow.
Oh, that's gonna be really cool, man. That's definitely one I'd love to get because I think that the Jordan cards in that run of Flair, right, Flair Showcase, they're just spectacular, right? And that is that the 98 Rose Zero?
This is the 97 Rose Zero, and it's not the Legacy collection. The Legacy collection, they're out of 100, and from in my point of view, who needs it? You know, this is out of 250, which is still rare, and it's the exact same front, other than the font isn't quite the same. Yeah, I love this card.
Yeah, I misspoke, right? I guess I meant to say Flair Showcase, right? That's what they relabeled like the brand, right? When they started doing the different rows and included the Legacy. But yeah, that card's an absolute monster, and I feel like you stole it in terms of the quality of the card for the grade.
Yeah,
absolutely killed it.
Yeah, I'm really. That's one where, just like with Nate's what it wasn't the Hank Aaron, your mantle. You know, when I put it on the spreadsheet, and immediately I'm in the black on what I assess the value of compared to what I paid for it.
Right.
It gives you such a joy of thinking like, yeah, I really stole this one.
Remind me, Jonathan, did you get that? Was that on a My Slabs auction?
It was one of the very first My Slabs auctions that they ran, and I saw it was in a recently graded 7, and I imagine it went straight to a consigner from grading to, and honestly, I've looked at it so closely, it looks like a 9. I think it's undergraded, so yeah, fun pickup.
I love that that's one of the wings of your collection, as Matthew likes to describe our collecting, the 90s Jordans, and your Jordan collection is so wide and so deep, and it's neat that you have all that knowledge and so many cool cards from that era.
Appreciate it. All right, what you got, Nate?
All right, so my second favorite pickup of the year was this. It's a E92 Dockman and Sons Honus Wagner, and it's the batting pose. There's the throwing and the batting, and so I got this one kind of earlier in the year, and it was one that I had seen on eBay, and then ended up striking up a conversation with the guy that had it, and ended up doing a deal for it. And it was my first Wagner card, and it was kind of one of those experiences when I got it where, that you have every year or two where you feel like it kind of changes your collection in a way, like it felt a little different and a little better. And like, I kind of achieved something as a collector, because this is one where I feel like I had to sort of, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but sort of earn the right to buy this card in a way and have it in my collection. Like, there's no starter playing Days Wagner, and they don't come up too often, and they're not inexpensive. And I feel like you kind of need to do a lot of research and spend some time thinking about the Wagner options and understanding them. And, and so I did that over the course of some years, and finally this year felt like I was ready to make that dive into getting my first one, and really like the color. I like the pose on this one. It was this one and the E95 Philadelphia Caramel were the two that I kind of decided I'd really like to go after first. They're among the more accessible of the Playing Days Wagner cards, and there we go. It's a little bit better color. So and I was happy with this example. It's got a little bit of creasing. It's certainly not undergraded, but it's nicely centered and has great color and registration. So been feeling really happy about this one.
I think that's a huge pickup, Nate. It's funny because number one, right, like Wagner cards have just they're just so expensive, right? Everybody always thinks of the T206, of course, but like all of his Playing Days cards, as you mentioned, are just incredibly expensive. Especially over the past 3 years, I would say they've really gotten very, very expensive. And what's funny is that I feel like within the hobby, right, like his impact and performance as a player is really dwarfed by how important that card is. But right, especially when you read In the Glory of Their Times, right, it's every player basically says it's him and Cobb are the best players they've ever seen, and then Cobb always has an asterisk of he was tough to deal with. Someone has this utmost respect for Wagner, and I particularly remember Sam Crawford talking about how he's this kind of thick, bow-legged guy, but he's like a rabbit in the infield, right, scooping everything up. And that when you think about classic shortstops, right, he's got to be I think he is at the top if you look at WAR and things like that, or Jaws gradings and things. Amazing.
Amazing. I think that's right, and that's such a great additional point, Matthew. Very well said. And that was a big part of what I felt like was the education that prepared me to get a Wagner as well, was really getting kind of ensconced in that history and his place in the game and his place in the dead ball era, how he was regarded by his peers at the time. And because his cards aren't cheap. And when you first come in, you kind of feel well, he's not, as significant as Cobb and maybe some of these other guys. But as you get more, you kind of, there aren't any readily accessible cards of his. His place was massive in the early part of the game. He was an absolutely revered figure. And so it kind of starts to make a little bit more sense as you get deeper and deeper into it. And the parts you described are a huge part of that.
Man, I'm just so happy you have the card. I have no idea what you paid for it. I don't care what you paid for it. I know it was an amazing buy. And I watched some of the other cards that have that same image. I don't think it was the documents, but one on REA just blew up. It went so high, and those cards are so scarce. And I'm really glad one of them is in your collection, Nate.
Nice, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Also getting a lot of shout outs in the chat for the Wagner. So we got TJ is online, says great wags. Buying my first wags is a high priority for 2025. Good for you, Nate. And that's the same for me. I would really love to add a Wagner in 2025 if I can. So yeah, awesome. And then we've got Litzy Sports Cards also says that card is breathtaking. So sounds like the chat is highly supportive of your addition, Nate.
Nice. Appreciate it. That we have a great active chat tonight. I love it. And folks liking our cards, that's not a bad thing either. So appreciate it, fellas. Matthew, what do you got for us?
All right, so I got another card. It's not, I don't know if I would call it vintage, and but be able to get a lot of.
Hoping this would be on your list.
Here we go. So what I'm showing here is a 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan, number 57 and a PSA 8. And ever since I bought this card, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, it's like one that I just cannot. I come back to it all the time. The eye appeal on this example, just like right when I saw it, just drew me in right away. And, again, having traded away my PSA 7 Jordan in the Mantle trade, this was a card I'd also like, being of someone who grew up in the burbs of Chicago in the 80s and 90s, like I cannot be in this hobby without having this card. It just doesn't make sense. And I think about, my childhood and how big of a deal this card was at that time. And it's just a card I had to have. And I just tried to be, very patient in finding one. And I think this example is just bonkers nice. It's just insanely nice for the grade. And I'm super happy to have it. And yeah, like I said, it's a card when I go to my case and I'm kind of like leafing through I have a small Zion case that holds about maybe 60 cards. And in that case is kind of where I keep all of my, like, what I call like iconic cards, the ones that I want to leaf through the most frequently. And even when I'm leaking through that group, this is a card I come back to a lot because it just feels so good to have it back in the collection and to have one that looks like a 10, but then it costs the price of a 10. It's something I'm super happy with. And yeah, so this was my number 2. Had to go with the MJ. Had to do it.
And when I see a card that I already have, but I have an example of, but I look at yours and I'm like, I want it. Give me. It's a beautiful card. And that's the thing I love about card. When there's a card you love, every time you see an example, you just think, yes, that's amazing. I want to hold it. What a good one.
Yeah, that thing is phenomenal, Matthew. I'm really glad that made your list. And remind me on your acquisition, was this like a Facebook auction?
It was the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. It was like I'm in a Facebook group that's called like vintage. It's called like trading card fire sales or something like that. And someone had put it on there in a Facebook auction. So it's kind of like under some rules that were like if there hasn't been a new number that someone put up within 24 hours, then the auction closed. That was kind of so in principle it could have like run in perpetuity. But I don't even these Facebook groups, it seemed kind of sketchy to me. But I did a lot of messaging with the guy, and actually ended up winning the card in some weirdo circumstances in the sense that I think like the top level buyer actually backed out for some reason. And then it came back to me and I got it for the price, for the price of like, a low in the histogram, a low in the distribution of prices for an 8. And, I was just in shock over the eye appeal. So I, had to get it.
Yeah.
Just had to get it.
Mookie Chilton, Mookie's asking, how, like, for you to trade away the 7 and upgrade to the 8, roughly, you don't have to get into specifics, but how expensive was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more expensive than the value I got in the trade for the 7, but the 7 was, I would say, like decent eye appeal, not amazing, but pretty decent. So it definitely was, more net than the 7, but this was also like, this was one of those cards that like you slide it into your case and you just feel like complete. You feel like the job is done. You've got the card that you're searching for. And like that's a really great feeling. And getting some good shout outs from the folks online. I did want to, Maddie C also says on the Instagram side of things, says that Jordan 8 breaks the system. And I think that's how I feel about it, right? It's like,
yeah.
I'm happy to pay the price of, low in the histogram of 8s to get one that looks like this. So super fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an incredible example. And, one of the things I love about that card is, to me, in a lot of ways, it is emblematic of and defines the strength of the hobby. because that card is population a billion, right?
Mhm.
And I have an 8 as well, and I love it, and everyone in the hobby loves it. It doesn't matter how many of them there are; they're so in demand. There's so many people that want it. The price stays strong. You know, with almost with any other card that there were that many of, it would kind of lose its luster and lose both its intellectual value and its monetary value. But this card just it doesn't, none of the hobby rules apply to it because it's so popular, and I just feel like it shows how kind of strong and broad we are as a hobby to be able to support this card for so many of us to love this card at the level that we do.
I am well said, Nate. Well said. Very cool. All right.
All right.
To you, Jonathan.
Back to me. All right. This is my top pickup of the year.
Final round.
When I was a kid, I had no confusion about what the Mickey Mantle rookie card was. I just want to say, and I've often argued that Mickey Mantle in the card hobby is more than a player. He was kind of an idea. If you grew up when I grew up, like to have a Mickey Mantle card, you didn't even really understand who the guy was. You didn't know necessarily that he was a switch hitter and that he hit 18 home runs in the World Series. Like he was just a larger than life idea. And I've had a 52 tops mantle for a few years, but I couldn't turn my gaze away from the golden era of baseball until I got his rookie card. I got it in also in Cleveland at the National. This was largely a trade from Stan's Vintage Cards. And I had this beautiful 53 tops Willie Mays. It was a PSA 5. It had an eye appeal sticker on it. But I didn't grow up as a kid thinking of the 53 tops Willie Mays card. I grew up as a kid thinking about having a Mickey Mantle rookie card someday. It's a PSA 1. It's not undergraded. It's got a little crease through his hat and some wax on the back. But it is so cool to own this card. And to have kind of pulled off a trade for most of the value of it was a really rewarding and memorable experience. So that's my Mantle rookie right there.
Jonathan, will you turn it for it so we can?
Yeah.
Nice,
and
man.
Since it's on my phone, the phone is
right.
Yeah.
I can see it well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. The centering, the color, the reg. What a great example. And your daughter was with you and played a role in engineering that trade and getting that card with you, right?
Yeah, Lucy is my advisor in chief when I'm at the card shows, and she's got a great eye. And we looked at lots of different examples, and this one was a 1. We didn't necessarily think we'd end up with a 1. We didn't think we'd end up with a 5 either. But we loved the example that we had somebody across from us who he kind of valued some cards we had, and we made it happen. And it really fun to finally land that card.
And that card is, like you said, the centering is really tough on it, but also the registration and the color, right, is super tough on that 51. And that definitely feels like a major landmark kind of milestone card in any collection, and I think it really fits yours. And like when you were talking, it was reminding me of being a kid and being at a card show and like seeing the Mickey Mantles in cases. Like I never saw 51 Bowman or a 52 tops. I'm sure it would have like blown my brain to like see such a thing at that time. But like you said, like Mickey Mantle was like larger than life. He wasn't a player. He was kind of like a god at the hobby. We're running around with our 89 Topsos like Canseco's, like dreaming one day of being able to get one of his cards. And so that's just like a massive moment in your collection. A lot of people in the chat really shouting you out. Mookie Chilson says this is just a gosh dang fireworks show. Holy moly. They got Jeremy Lee says that mantle is beautiful. What a card, Jonathan. Congrats. Lots of people having very similar reactions. Tony from Southern Collector, beautiful 51 rookie. So lots of love in the chat for that 51 mantle for sure. A lot about age.
Yeah, just one other point, to be able to pair it with your 52 tops, right? And that to have that pairing and that's one of the best pairs in the hobby. So that's just makes it that much cooler.
It feels pretty special. And then to feel like I really accomplished in my mantle collection what I wanted to, and even in that whole era, and then turn my gaze to pre-war was a fun kind of milestone for me.
Nice.
And very nice. All right, Nate.
All right. Yeah. So top pickup of the year. Yeah. So I one of my favorite sets is the Cracker Jack, and pair of sets, whatever you want to call it, Cracker Jack cards. I love them. And so I got one this year that's now among my top couple favorite Cracker Jacks, and that is the 1914 Grover Alexander in a PSA 2. Yeah. So this one, this came up on an auction in Memory Lane, in an auction that ended in May. And it was the Memory Lane auction where we found out after the auction ended that actually several of the cards had been stolen from the hotel safe. You guys probably remember that story. There were a few thefts this year in the hobby, and that was one of the more high profile ones. So, when I had seen this card come up, I really set my sights on it. It was a card I've really coveted. It comes up very infrequently. And, this one was just a kind of felt like the perfect fit for my collection. And so, sometimes when a card comes up, you feel like, I've actually got like a 50% chance of winning this card because I know I'm going to go hard for it, and so I did that and I won it, and I actually still had a couple more bids in my back pocket if I had been pressed. So, I felt really good. And then this news came out after that all these Cracker Jacks from the auction had been stolen. So I had a few like really nervous days. Like, did I actually just get that? Am I really going to get the card that I just won? And, that was a whole like weird situation, but, and then when I got the thing in hand, it just looks so nice. It just feels kind of like, I thought it would, and being the perfect fit. It has some really nice caramel staining, and it feels to me, and the cards that feel most special to us a lot of times are cards that we feel like are maybe a little bit underrated. And like, we kind of feel like maybe not that we know something, but we recognize something before maybe some other collectors do or whatever. And I kind of have that little bit of a special feeling about this card because it's, it's just super low pop. Even among the 1914s, it's one of the lower pop Hall of Famers. It's Grover Alexander's true rookie card, which like there are not many Hall of Famer rookie cards in the 1914 Cracker Jack set. And, he's just a super premier pre-war player, had one of the best stretches of any pitcher ever, had, a really interesting story going off to World War I and fighting there, and then coming back with, struggling with alcoholism, but still resuming his career and having some success after that. And just, a fascinating personal story, a rookie card, a great player from one of my favorite sets to collect, with an example that, feels like the perfect fit for my collection. So this just feels like one of those cards where like I got it out of the box and I'm like, there's zero chance this card's ever leaving my collection. So yeah.
Oh man, that's an awesome card, Nate. And like you said, like I feel like, because he like changed teams, he had issues with like sobriety post war. Like I feel like maybe he's a little bit underappreciated, right? And if you look at like the Jaws ratings of pitchers, which is kind of like my favorite thing to look at when I'm comparing players on Baseball Reference. And, before Alexander actually, like by those rankings, is the fourth best starting pitcher of all time, behind like Wajo, Cy Young, and Roger Clemens. And if you look at his stats, it's like absolutely insane, right? And to have his rookie card and that level of eye appeal, and also like just the, as you said, like the pure rarity side of the Cracker Jack, especially the 1914, it's a monster. It's an absolute monster card, and so cool that. That's why I always say that Nate has like one of the best like pre-war PCs of all the people to show. It's like insane. Totally.
Yes, nice. Yeah, and it's an undervalued card because everybody had a T206 from the era, but that that card being a rookie, Hall of Fame rookie in the Cracker Jack set is so. That makes it a really special card too. I'm glad you picked that up, Nate.
Yeah, thank you guys. And then, I was looking at it with my son, Luke, that you guys know, and he actually got even one more kind of cool detail on it for me. So, it has some staining, and in the, let's see, it's kind of right through the jack, in in Cracker Jack there is, and it's hard to see, but there's a stain up there, and Luke was looking at it and he was like, you realize that's like a little fingerprint? And it actually is. I put it like under magnification and brightly, and it's like a small fingerprint of, what was probably either candy or oil. Maybe just maybe the kid that pulled it out of the Cracker Jack box left his fingerprint on it in the top right corner, which kind of feels even a little bit cooler. So I like the fingerprint stain.
That's awesome. And the centering and color look insane, right? For the grade, it looks absolutely stunning.
The color is crazy. I couldn't believe it when I took it out of the box, like just how it's like it glows. And, so you never, that's like the hardest thing to judge when you buy a card remotely, right? You just don't know what people have done to the image. But I took it out, I was like, wow, like it really looks like it did online. So,
yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the enduring appealing facets of the Cracker Jacks, right? Is that like that punchy red? It's just like boom, and right, it is you, and you immediately know what the card is, and then like the big like Cracker Jack lettering at the top. I mean, they are really special cards, and I think certainly for vintage collectors, being able to track one down, even of a non-star, non-Hall of Famer, these are really cool cards to have in your collection, and definitely like connect you to a pretty like a really powerful set within the canon of the hobby for sure.
Yeah. Well said. Yep. All right, Matthew. Let's see your number one pickup of the year.
All right, number one pickup of the year for me. This one was pretty easy choice, actually. It's 1933 DeLong Lou Gehrig. So this card was an absolute monster of a pickup for me. This was a card that so this is in a PSA 2. This is a card that I've always wanted to have an example of. It wasn't really necessarily on my radar or something I was really targeting this year, but it was kind of just pure fortunate circumstances where I came into kind of a windfall from selling a bunch of Laughlin 1974 Laughlin cards that got really heated. Once we'll get into that a little bit later, but I came into a bunch of money, and I was like, these cards are so hot right now, I just need to sell them. And at the same time, this card came up from Ash on Facebook, and I was like, I need that to have this card. So, right, like Lou Gehrig doesn't have many playing days cards, right? I mean, I think the ones that come to mind most naturally, right, are the 233 Gaudis and the 234 Gaudis. He's got also a U.S. caramel that's really awesome. But I really love the design of these DeLongs. Right, it's kind of this funny kind of cartoon picture of a stadium, and then kind of a black and white photo superimposed. And Gehrig kind of carries the set, right? He's the strongest player in the set. There aren't a ton of these. I want to say the pop is something like 240 or something like that. So not a ton, but quite a bit fewer than the Gaudis. But it's just such a cool card, and I'm such a huge Lou Gehrig fan that this was always a card I was hoping to be able to add to my collection someday. And I think it was just a matter of like circumstances that allowed me to move into it. And I think for the grade and the 2, it's got like some creasing towards the corners, but I mean, come on, I'm not going to begrudge that at all. And, in the back, it kind of talks about, it's weird, like give you some heads ups about like how to play first base. It's just pretty funny. But yeah, just a stunning card, and I'm really happy to have it. Happy to have it in the collection for sure. So,
for folks who can't see the video that are listening to the podcast, the card is perfect. I forget the 2, forget the whatever the flaw. That's exactly like that card is supposed to look. I love it, Matthew. It's such a beautiful example.
Yeah, I agree. That's a OG beauty of a pre-war card right there. Like that I just feel like those get in collections and just stay there. I mean, that's like it's about 250 is the pop or so.
That's right. Yeah, you recall correctly. Yeah,
right. So a tiny fraction of what the Gaudi pops are, and and just such a beautiful card and a nice size, a great pose. And, it's one because of the kind of cartoonish nature that took me a little while to kind of come around on, but I was getting there. And then being involved with you as you were getting yours has put it squarely on my list as well of a card that I'd love to get. I feel like you kind of need to go through a little bit of a process with that one of wanting it, and then it needs to kind of climb and then one needs to be. That's not one you just decide to get and then get it. It's a couple year process of starting to want it until you get it, I feel like. And that one has really moved up my list. And man, seeing yours is just great. And I know what affection, Lou is one of your very favorite guys to collect, right? And just love and connect with his story really deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then that like paired with like the few cards he has, like I feel like the art in the Gaudi cards is so easy to connect with. Like they're just very beautiful. Like no one
Yeah.
argue about that. Like it's certainly true that the design is a bit funky, right? To combine like a weird color cartoon image with like the black and white overlay of like basically what looks like a giant, right? Like standing in the
Right.
middle of the stadium. And I think one thing that helped me really get interested in the card was I bought a Kai Kyler as part of my Cubs run. So I had a DeLong Kai Kyler, and kind of having that card in my collection and allowing me to kind of get a little bit more like direct experience, like looking at these DeLongs, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to get the Gary someday. So that's kind of where that comes from for sure.
Man,
So
now
number one card of 2024 for me.
now we all want one someday. And I'll tell you this, it shows you how much these three guys and probably all the folks in the chat love the cards. We thought this showing our top 3 pickups of the year was like the intro to the segment. We just talked about 9 cards for 45 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I think we love the cards.
Right. That kind of puts us at an inflection point. Do we do a marathon show or do we do speed rounds from here?
I feel like 2024 recap will be a good rest of the show. Frankly, we have a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I like
I feel like the component that's maybe the more like personal side of it, maybe we can go a little bit faster through that. But I definitely I hit up the let's whoa, that's a weird course of settings there. Okay, that's better. Okay. So yeah, let's keep it going here. So I want to start off with you, Nate. We're going to transition to this topic of, some of the big highlights in terms of the vintage hobby in 2024. I know that you had kind of a really cool topic kind of keyed up. So you want to launch into it?
Well, so I think it's an important one to hit, and that's just kind of some thoughts on the market. It's something we often on this show try not to talk about too much, is the economic elements, but obviously it's a part of what we all think about as we collect, and we're pretty serious about it, and we put some real resources into it, and we kind of are interested in how the market is doing, right? It's not the primary reason we collect, but it's a real part of it. And so, one of the things that I like to look at, and it's certainly not wholly indicative, but it at least gives you a sense for kind of what's going on in the market, is the card ladder indexes. And they have a vintage index that's comprised of about 5,400 cards. And then a pre-war index that's comprised of about 6,500 cards. And the vintage index, which I believe is, post-war to 1980 or 1985, that was down 4% this year. And the pre-war index is basically completely flat. So, even for the year. On Card Ladder, I have a 54 card index of kind of like many of my best cards, and it's baseball and basketball vintage cards. And that index was up 4.8% this year. So, that was kind of like a few indexes that I just sort of took a look at coming on. And then, just sort of anecdotally, I feel like that's pretty indicative. I feel like it's been a strong year for the market, maybe up a little bit overall. And to me, it's just felt like a very good place for for the hobby to be. We've had this wild ride over the last 5 years or so of, spectacular gains, and then in a lot of aspects of the hobby, huge losses. And on the vintage side, even, some cards are down a fair bit from that wild first quarter of 2021 when everything was just insane. But we've gotten, I feel like, to a really kind of nice sweet spot for collecting where, things are kind of even, kind of maybe up a little bit, and you can look for a deal or a card that you feel like is a good deal within the context of the market and not have to worry about wild fluctuations, and, kind of back to sort of feeling like over time things are going to kind of inch up a little bit. And then, within that, I think we've seen some of the trends that we've been seeing over the last couple of years certainly continue. So signed vintage and very high eye appeal vintage seem like they continue to do really well. And there were a couple of sales in December that stood out. There was the 52 Topps Mantle PSA 3 DNA 10. So the card was a 3 and the auto was a 10 that sold for $793,000 earlier this month. And that was the highest price ever for a signed vintage card. And I think I saw something that it had sold, I believe, around 450 or so last year. So it was up like 60-70% or so in a year. And then around that same time in early December, REA had a red Gaudy Ruth, the number 149, that was a PSA 2 that sold for $33,500. And that card averages about $10,000. So that $33,500 is the average price that a 6 goes for. And it was super high eye appeal and it looked like a 6, but that was just kind of one of those cards that just, sort of showed. I feel like maybe a couple years ago for an eye appeal card, people would pay a 50, 60, maybe even 70% premium, but to pay a 200 or 250% premium for how the card looks and really be pretty completely willing to ignore what the grade says, I feel like shows the continued evolution of the, the emphasis on eye appeal. So I thought those were a couple interesting things. The other interesting thing was, we talked a little bit just briefly before about the T206 Wagner. I don't think one sold this past year, at least not publicly. I think the last one that sold was 16 months ago in September of 23, and that was a heavily altered example. So it's been quite a while since one of those has changed hands. Those were a few of the kind of trends and highlights that stood out to me. You guys have any thoughts on the year that was in the market?
I mean, I think that the thing that I would add would be that it felt like the likelihood that a card could like hide, like a high eye appeal card could hide, and you could like get in and snag it for like not much more than, kind of within the distribution of maybe even the grade above, is just like gone. I feel like there's a decent amount of contingent of people that are like just scouring these auctions, like looking for the high eye appeal examples and like jumping on it and having like, I think about Travis, right? Jackies and Jordans, like he just jumps on stuff that he sees as, and it's always a hope that like, oh God, I hope Travis is fighting this one, right? I mean, I really feel like it seems like people are either, there are more people looking for those cards, or the people that have been looking for them are more aggressive in making sure that they land them. And so it feels to me like, it's so hard to look at like the indices on card ladder and things that kind of just aggregate things by grade, just because that like that level of discrimination that like we hold so dear isn't available like in the data, right? And so but
and Matthew,
go ahead.
To that point, again showing like you got to dig beneath. Card ladder excluded that sale of the Ruth. They're great guys. They're among the smartest guys in the hobby, but they're modern focused, and they probably looked at that sale and felt like it was shill bid or something. And I'm sure it was a real sale, but they just, people, if you're not kind of deep in the eye appeal thing, you don't understand why a card is selling for 3.5x what all the other ones sell for. And, unless you look at the card and kind of know what we're talking about, so.
Yeah. I know. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, I definitely saw vintage collectors start to kind of revolt against the grading companies and say, no, we're all going to decide what this car is worth based on our eyes. And I'll give one more comment, and then I'm just going to plow into my next point, my next look back from 2024. When you were saying what the market on vintage cards did, flat for your index, or slightly down, I thought, what else did I spend money on in 2024? My New Balance sneakers are probably down 50%. My Honda Civic is probably down 15%. I think all my Banana Republic shirts are down like 80% on the year. So I'm like, this is a great thing to be putting my money in. For everything else I spent money on and enjoyed, and the food is gone, and I'm heavier for it. So I love what we're putting our money into, and if it's flat, great, and if it goes up over time, even better. So it's a fun place to be putting our dollars, I think. So all right, I'm going to go into my look back from 2024. It was mergers and acquisitions. This actually was a follow-on from 2023 because we saw, like in the past few years, I think Golden was acquired by, remind me, I want to say PSA, Collectors, and then Fanatics, I think in 2023 bought PWCC. But we saw a lot more of this in 2024, and I think it started impacting us more. The first one, I think from the year that I recall, there was kind of a widespread kind of bummer about this, was Collectors, which owns PSA, bought SGC, the number 2 grading company in the hobby. And I remember everybody just sort of looking around saying, like, is this okay? Interestingly, from that one, it feels like so far nothing's really changed. But I think that kind of started a cascade of M&A, mergers and acquisitions in the hobby. Then by my notes, it was in April that there was this huge deal where eBay acquired from Collectors Golden Auctions.
Mm-hmm.
And Collectors acquired the eBay vault. So now PSA has their own vault, and eBay owns a high-end auction house in Golden. And that was a really interesting one. And then following on in the year, and I'll call this sort of M&A integration, I think it was July that Fanatics announced the sunsetting of the PWCC brand, and they changed the app. I know a lot of folks in this chat had some consternation about having to figure out how to log into their PWCC app, now their Fanatics app. And then it was maybe 1 month later that the PWCC premier auction was sunset. And in partnership with Sotheby's, Fanatics did this big high-end sports card auction, very New York style with Sotheby's. And so we've seen a bunch of investment into the hobby and consolidation of some of these assets where we all spend a lot of our time. Some apps that we used to use in auction houses have kind of gone away, and now it's Fanatics. And it's had a lot of impact, I think, on a lot of the places we spend our time. And I wonder do you guys think differently about Golden or eBay or vaulting or Fanatics based on all of that?
It's a really good question. I think that at least I have been largely unimpacted just because I don't vault my cards. I think I certainly buy like the majority of my higher end cards in private deals. And I've purchased like I've never purchased a card from Golden. I purchased like 2 cards lifetime from PWCC, maybe 3 cards. So I feel like for me, it's been largely unimpacted, but I am like, I feel like I'm not one of those people that believes that because they're a vintage collector, they're immune from these changes, right? And at least from my vantage point, it feels like there's kind of an alignment between like PSA and eBay, right? That, now giving you this opportunity to like, okay, you get your card graded, you immediately can put it on the eBay marketplace, like through PSA, and that, they'll sell it. And I feel like, these moves will have impacts in the overall hobby and the overall interest and like what happens going forward. And so I'm kind of interested to see how it shakes out, but I haven't been like impacted that much, like directly. I don't know. What about you, Nate?
Well, first, I'll say I love that about how you collect, Matthew, that you are as unimpacted as you are, that you seriously, that you find you find ways, you've built a network and, a process to be able to do, virtually all private deals. I feel like that's really the best model to do what we do, and I hope to grow toward that model as well, and in part under your tutelage. But um, so yeah, I mean, I'd say of those ones that you mentioned, Jonathan, Golden, I don't do much with them. I have never really had the best impression of them, and they sunk further in my view when so I feel like, to me, the biggest one of the biggest issues in the hobby is the fees that all these platforms charge to transact, and that like huge tax on collectors, and it just feels excessive to me. And Golden bumped their fee up from 20% to like 23%, and their buyer's premium, and so that just made me really not want to do business with them. And then but I have done a lot with PWCC, and, I've definitely been, on the ground floor of seeing the changes there, and some have been a little bit better, but I think the vast majority have not. The usability is worse. I think a lot of people are gone that used to be there, and it's lost, some of the usability. Usability really is that was the great thing about PWCC, is they had this great interface that, just felt so intuitive and was, so easy to use. And that's been compromised a bit. Some of the other subtle changes that aren't great there. And then, the SGC purchase by PSA or collectors bums me out some too. I agree with you, Jonathan, that I feel like we haven't seen it yet, but I feel like having, for us as vintage collectors, there are really only two grading companies, or now it's all under one company, but PSA and SGC, and to not have any kind of check on PSA and not have any kind of sort of true independent alternative doesn't feel like the best thing in the long run. But I agree. So far, it seems like they've stayed independent. They've continued to do what they do, and I haven't heard about or seen any bad developments from that. But I'm watching it with a wary eye.
Agreed.
You got a comment here from Mookie Chilson. He says, I still wish SGC was an actual competitor to PSA. I think the promise of pricing competition, registry, and more were eliminated when collectors bought SGC. And I think that was exactly the criticism that I think were on a lot of the minds of vintage collectors in particular about what kind of long-term impacts of this would be.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. All right. Let's see. So next topic, I guess, will be mine. I'll try to go through it really quickly. So I was trying to think about, things that kind of impacted the overall vintage hobby in 2024. And one thing that struck my mind was the May 29th announcement that the statistics of Negro League players would now be recognized as Major League statistics. And this was and I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, and that you think about vintage cards as being this like realm of very strong like pricing stability and this kind of like overall slow increases as a function of time, at least keeping pace with inflation and so forth. But that had a really big impact. Suddenly, sets that were focused on the Negro Leagues, like the 1974 Laughlin set, and I'm sure the Tolateros cards and things like that, like they just skyrocketed, right? You had cards going for like 8 to 10x what they were going for, simply because now these statistics were recognized as major league statistics. And in particular, the one record I think that really comes to people's mind is the career batting average record that Josh Gibson now holds over Ty Cobb, right? And different people have different opinions about whether that's fair or not. But in any case, that aside, it had a really big impact on the hobby. I think that the prices have tempered somewhat since that explosion in early summer, but they're still really high. So I'm still like biding my time to rebuy a new 74 Laughlin set, because it just skyrocketed into craziness. I will say it is very cool to see a lot of those kind of unheralded players getting their due, like a lot of players that Negro League players that aren't Josh Gibson that you don't hear that much about, and just see somebody paying like $1,000 for a card that's kind of like like a mid tier within that set. I think that was really cool to see. So that was something that was like totally shocking to me, and I did not expect the market to respond in the way that it did.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see the way that there's still news in our world outside of, who had some triple doubles during the NBA playoffs or who hit a home run during the World Series. The impact the hobby and impact the values of our cards. It was really interesting.
Yeah, people famously say like this guy, Josh Gibson can't tear an ACL, but he can suddenly become the all-time Major League Baseball hits leader or batting average leader, right? Like, yeah, that was really, really interesting to see and really neat, and we all have a ton of appreciation for the Negro League players and what few cards there are of them to collect. And so to see them kind of pushed to the forefront during this past year was really cool.
Yeah, that was the moment or the thing that I kind of in this kind of this discussion. So maybe
do you want just one other thing, Matthew? This might be a perfect moment to tell us what you're wearing tonight on top.
Great entree there, Nate. So I actually posted this on Instagram a little while ago. It's like I put a picture of this hat that my wife got me for Christmas with a question of like, what team is represented by this hat and like, why is it important? Right. And so, a decent amount of people got the answer correct, which I was really excited about. So this is a Montreal Royals cap, which was the minor league team of the Brooklyn Dodgers, the first non-Negro League professional team that Jackie Robinson went to after the Dodgers signed him. And so this was it's a wool cap. It's from that Ebbets Field flannel company that makes a lot of cool stuff. And I've been rocking this hat ever since Christmas Day when I got it. It's a fun one for sure.
That's really cool. And if you're ever walking down the street and you come across someone that like recognizes it and compliment like that's an immediate friend, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm definitely gonna wear this hat maybe at the National or something and just see what fraction of people recognize it. Yeah, really cool.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, Nate, you want to go again with your next topic?
Sure. Yeah. So, a big part of our collecting, for a lot of us is, the nostalgia, obviously, and the connection to the players. And one of the times that we feel that most deeply is when we lose some of these legends that we collect. And so, one of the things that we often do at the end of a year is think about some of the folks that we've lost. And, this certainly was a difficult year for that among folks that are prominent in the hobby and among, with collectors. And we really lost many of, great personalities and characters and great players this past year, and some of them really close in time frame. So I put together just a little bit of a list of some of the legends that we lost this past year. And it included Bill Walton, O.J. Simpson, Dikembe Mutombo, Orlando Cepeda, Fernando Valenzuela, and then 4 guys that I feel like are kind of really big guys in the hobby. And most recently, Ricky Henderson, just a couple weeks ago, Pete Rose, not too long before that. And then within the same week in June, we lost Jerry West and the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays. So, those are sad times for all of us. I think those are times that we we feel even a greater connection when they're people that we collect or, people that we enjoyed watching or people that we've enjoyed learning about. And, having the hobby, our ties to the hobby and our ties to our cards, I think we feel even that much more powerfully during those times. And, if a few of them from that list that, really, I feel like I felt more than the others were Bill Walton. I think growing up and hearing him as an announcer and his, really quirky, unusual, fun, joy for life type of personality would just come through the screen. And, listening to him over and over and over, calling NBA games and learning about his career and everything, he was just such a unique character. And, so definitely was really sad losing him. And then Ricky was, one of my favorite guys growing up. I mean, so many of us enjoyed him and as a player and as a personality. And actually, one of the things that I got into this year was, and many of us did, and Jonathan, I know you very much so, but doing some some binder and 9-pocket collecting. And so this is Ricky's entire Tops run. And I had most of that from collecting as a kid, but I added 1 or 2 more this year to kind of fill out that page, and got some other Ricky stuff that I've just been collecting really recently as well. And, definitely felt that loss. And then Jerry West and of course, Willie Mays as well. Willie is someone that we all really enjoy collecting a lot. And he was, maybe just such an iconic legend and, representative of that golden era as much as anyone, along with the Mick and Jackie, certainly. But, so, those were some of the really prominent guys that we sadly lost this past year.
Yeah. And someone from the comments mentioned Brooks Robinson too, which we talked about on another episode. But yeah, some of those guys, Willie Mays, it was one where so grateful that he was with us so, as long as he was, and it still felt too soon. And then like Ricky, he just seemed so young. And I think back to the legends of that era of baseball, and a lot of them left us too soon. Tony Gwynn comes to mind. Kirby Puckett comes to mind. But I'm so grateful. It also makes me grateful for this hobby, for all the people that are going to remember those heroes of the game, and that we can celebrate them like this.
Yeah, really well said, guys. I think it's funny. You think about Willie, it was like, really sad that we lost him, but it was also like, he'd really gotten up there in age, right? He'd been like the greatest living ball player for, 50 years or something like that, right?
Right.
Yeah. But then, Ricky was a really big shock. I think, I still, that's still kind of reverberating around kind of the hobby social media, right? Still seeing a lot of Ricky posts. He was the man of steel, right? He seemed invincible, right? He could do anything. And, someone who's been pretty active on the show circuit and things like that. And I imagine you've got a whole slew of people that were just assuming they'd be able to get Ricky next year, whatever. And they know that's not going to be possible anymore. And so, we definitely lost one of like baseball's greatest characters, and certainly someone who, from the advanced statistics perspective, was, like highly impactful to the game in a way that like a lot of people didn't recognize in the time, even though he was so disruptive, and also hilarious in terms of the things that he said. Like I saw that thing about one of the funniest things I saw was like from Harold Reynolds, where like Harold Reynolds like won the stolen base title one year because Ricky got hurt, and then like Ricky just like called him up after the season, and it was like, oh, you got 60 is not nothing. He's like, 60 is nothing. Like Ricky will have 60 by the All-Star break, and then he just hung up. There's stuff like it's just so awesome, right? He's a monster. And so that one really impacted me. One of my brothers, when we were growing up, like that was the player that he collected, was Ricky Henderson. And so that was definitely, and TJ points out that Ricky had the $1 million check that he never cashed that caused like massive amounts of confusion within the athletics accounting department. And all these stories about Ricky are just amazing, right? And it's a really massive loss for baseball, for sure. Yeah. All right, Jonathan, you want to go?
Yeah. All right. I told you guys I was going to do this. Instead of picking one, I'm just going to empty the vault. I had this long list of what happened in 2024. So I'm going to read through some things on my list, and you guys can respond if anything hits home with you. There was a Wilt Chamberlain rookie that had been found in a closet after 60 years, discovered, graded an SGC 10, bought at auction for over $1 million, and then crossed to a PSA 10. There was the signed 52 Tops mantle that set an all-time record, which Nate referenced earlier. There was the King of Collectibles show, where we all might have cringed several times at Ken Golden talking about vintage baseball cards, but enjoyed it as well. There were some high-profile thefts in our hobby. There was the Strongsville one, which Nate referenced earlier, where Memory Lane ran the auction in any event. The bad guys got caught in that case. Then there was down in Dallas when Ash was very publicly robbed, and the bad guys, I believe, are still at large, and then more recently at the Philly show. Caitlin Clark deserves a mention in the hobby of really, not just what she did for WNBA, but what she did for women's sports cards. There was the Olympics, as well as a very high-profile bounty around a one-of-one card between Ken Golden and what's his bucket from the sports card investor. And I think the one-of-one card eventually was found and auctioned off. Was it Golden where it was auctioned? Is that right?
Was it? Has it come out? I don't.
Or am I remembering wrong? Yeah, correct me.
I feel like the unsigned one was auctioned at Golden. I don't
Right.
know if the signed one has ever been found.
Yeah, did it? Was it never found? Wow, but
I don't recall seeing it if it was. Yeah.
the beat goes on and on and on. There were Major League Baseball. It was the season of Ohtani and Judge, two of the best seasons we've ever seen in modern baseball, and then auctions for home run baseballs with the 50-50 Ohtani ball going for like $5 million. The Freddie Freeman home run ball going for over $1 million at auction. That was really big in the hobby. There was I would say a resurgence in Jordan inserts from the 90s we saw, and a lot of excitement around that. And then the last one I wanted to mention, and this is one I'm still thinking about. There's a little bit of a sense of loss or loss of innocence from the way CT scanners have been shown to be able to show what's on the inside of most unopened sports card boxes and packs. And that's one where I think we're all still kind of, it was a big scandal in July, and it was like, hey, the wax market is over. And I'm not sure we all know kind of what'll be the fallout. And I imagine there will be a lot of new technology in sports cards that kind of deals with that one.
Yeah, I think that the CT scanning one it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think that, people are really curious to see, especially in high-end product like NT and Flawless and probably like Dynasty and baseball, what they do to, reduce the impact of CT scanning. I'm really afraid that the consequence is going to be, more redemptions, because that's like kind of the most straightforward solution to that problem.
Yeah.
But that would be pretty not cool, right? Nobody likes pulling redemptions, right? But yeah, that's not.
Maybe less breaking and less bounties and more collecting. Maybe there's a pot. Probably not, but
Yeah, probably.
I'd add Wemby mania and then you hit on it with Jordan, but I feel like that was a really big story. Jordan's cards were just crazy hot this year, especially a lot of the 90s Jordan cards. But I looked at his market on Card Ladder, and it's comprised of like 1,800 cards, and it was up 27% this year. Jeez. Which, and kind of like most things being kind of flat, that was one that really jumped out. So I think we all knew before the start of this year that MJ was a pretty good player and pretty collectible, but a lot of people got a lot of MJ religion this year.
I think the fact that Nat Turner recently on his Instagram page was ripping up a bunch of high value 90s basketball wax maybe shows that that we can still assume there's a lot of collectors out there that just want to open old packs and haven't run them all through CT scanners, but who knows.
Yeah, so we got some other good comments. Another big one was Kurt's Card Care, right? That was especially with the Wemby 101 rookie. People talking about, is it okay or not to soak cards or to, apply chemicals to improve the surface condition. The Lissy Sports Cards brought up the sports card therapist fall from grace. I think that was actually in November of 2023, if I recall that correctly. But yeah, some really interesting hobby happenings in 2024. I hope that I honestly think that a lot of these things are definitely noise in the realm of 1966 Topps guys collecting. And I'm hoping, to keep my nose back to, on these vintage cards and on Cubs cards and figure out be okay, weather these various storms.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. So let's round off to the end here. So usually at the end of the show, we like to do a little bit of, any wrap up thoughts and any recent pickups. So maybe we can start with you, Jonathan, on that, if you don't mind. Do you have some recent pickups you want to share, or some kind of closing thoughts?
One of my closing thoughts from this year is, for me, it was a year of learning to slow down. I think a lot of us got back into this hobby when we had a little bit of spending power. It was during a pandemic, and it was go, go, go. And this year, I've really enjoyed slowing down. I had fewer pickups. I think I've enjoyed them more. And it's been a couple months actually since I bought a sports card. And that's okay with me. I'm really excited. I'm thinking about Chicago next year. I'm excited about it. But I'll show something that's not a sports card. I'm back in Ohio for the holidays, and my brother-in-law had gotten back into the hobby. Also, he joined me in Cleveland last year, and we were walking the floor looking at. There were some comic book dealers in Cleveland, and we were looking at graded comics. At the time, neither one of us owned one, and I told him, I said, you know what? If I ever bought a graded comic, I think I would want either a reprint or a beater version of it, just so I could actually read it and enjoy it. And for Christmas this year, he bought me this Spider-Man comic from my birth year, from 1978.
Oh, cool.
Which is a 9.6, and he bought me a beater version of it that has kind of a ripped and like creased cover. And he wrapped them up both together, and he said, "Hey, I had been thinking about that conversation you had, and it made me so happy." He just gave me this a couple days ago. But it reminded me of part of the joy of being a collector. Are these little ways you can connect with other people? And I don't know, TJ is online, is in the comments. He's a guy I remember sending a card off to. I hadn't even met him in person, but I just sent him something. And I think the way we can give little gifts that are meaningful, and we know that people appreciate them because we get collecting, is a really cool thing. And now I have this connection with my brother-in-law because of it. So that's a Spider-Man comic book. It could have been a Tony Gwynn card from 1986, but yeah, that really made an impact on me.
Very cool. So I'm going to go next, just because I'm going to give Nate the chance to close us off. So I had two kind of recent things that I wanted to chat about. Number one is, I definitely resonate with you, Jonathan, your remarks about slowing down. I feel like 2024 was definitely slower for me in terms of adding new cards. I think part of it was just that, like, I got a lot of stuff that I really like, and I want to make sure I enjoy it. But also, there was such stiff competition for the high eye appeal stuff that sometimes, like, I'm just gonna chill out. I don't need this right now, kind of thing. But one thing I picked up recently that was a really big deal pickup for me, that I wanted for a really long time, was a piece of memorabilia, actually, and that's this thing here. So this is a game used baseball from the 2016 World Series. This was from Game 6. Of course, I would love to get a Game 7 baseball, but like, that's never going to happen. But I was able to get this Game 6 game used baseball, and it's so cool that Major League Baseball does this thing where they kind of attach a hologram to all of the balls that are in play, so that you can then go online and figure out exactly what play it was used. So I was able to, like, track down on YouTube, exactly the moment that this ball was in play. So this was a wild pitch, actually. I think it was in the 4th or 5th inning to Anthony Rizzo, and this ball got a lot of airtime because it was a wild pitch that kind of caromed off of the ump, and then Chris Bryant took second. And so, anyway, for me and my Cubs fandom, like, this game, this ball is from the freaking World Series with the Cubs. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. So that was one thing. Another thing that I've done, like, more recently to kind of satiate the need to get more cars, is I've been kind of getting in touch with the cheap stuff. I got myself a nice box of 1989 Topps. Yeah, this is so much fun. So you can get a box of these cards for like $30, and at least for me, 1989 Topps was one of the first sets that I remember really collecting the hell out of it. And just like opening these cards and kind of like leafing through it, feeling them in your hands, really takes you back to, like, takes me back to when I was, just first collecting. And it's fun because, like, there's nothing awesome in these packs, right? So it's all about, like, looking on the back and figuring out that actually it's weird. Ventura County, which is the county I live in, like, had a minor league baseball team in 1985, and I never do that. And so, like, I've been doing a lot of just opening these packs kind of one every couple days, and just, I'm putting them in order by team and all this kind of stuff. And it's really been cool to kind of connect with cards at the very, very low end, the very, very low end. That's been really fun.
That's great. Those are a couple awesome pickups. Anything bringing you closer to that Cubs team is special, I know, in your collection, and it's cool that you continue to find ways to do that. And the junk wax rips, we know, hold a special place for us. We do that annually now in at the National, and you doing a little bit of that in between. We won't consider that cheating on us. It's all right to do a little mid-year too. So that's great, man.
All right, you want to go, Nate?
Yeah, sure. So I have two of them here. One is a 1935 Diamond Stars Paul Wainer.
Nice.
And the reason I got this is because he's one of the guys that has a chapter in Glory of Their Times, which is a book that the three of us and some others all had some good times discussing and bonding over as collectors this year. And it's kind of started a little project for me of trying to collect. And, unfortunately, and some of them I'm having to get in slabs and free them from their slabs. This is going to be one of those. I'm going to be doing some damage to plastic here later tonight or tomorrow to get this one out. But I'm trying to collect all the folks that had a chapter in Glory of Their Times and have a raw card, and I'm keeping them in the book. And so when I page through the book, it kind of marks the chapter, and I have that opportunity to have that hobby connection to the book. And the guys that each had a chapter, and then some of the guys that are really prominently mentioned too, like John McGraw and Fred Merkel and some of the others. And one of the cool things about Wainer is he's one of the guys that talked a lot about Honus Wagner. Wainer was a Pirates player, and Wagner preceded him and then was a coach for part of his time. And he talked a little bit about Wagner taking the field and everyone stopping what they were doing to watch him field ground balls and stuff. So it's kind of neat connection to some of the other aspects of collecting as well. And then the other one is 1964 Topps Giants Roberto Clemente, which is a really pretty card, not one I've had before. And this one was sent to me by Paul, Vintage Card Fiend, that we know on Instagram. Yeah,
Great guy,
great raw card collector, puts together some of the best images of his massive and beautiful raw card collection. So he and I were talking, and I participated in one of the little contests that he had at one point, and he ended up sending me this beautiful card, which I got in the mail a few weeks ago. And you guys talk about it. It's the end of the year, you kind of look back a little bit, and I think we all recognize it's the community above everything. And through IG and our time going to shows and doing this, and the guys talking to us in the chat throughout the night and stuff. I mean, that's more than anything. The cards are a close second, but the community is the best part of it. So, final thought.
Very, very well said, Nate. Very well said. So with that will close out our December episode of Rough Cuts and our last episode of 2024. I expect that we will be back in January. As to which weekend in January that will be, I do not know. But we will definitely be back in January, and very excited to have a really fun collecting in 2025 and getting the opportunity to kind of share that collecting journey and our thoughts with you in the vintage hobby when we get around to it.
Yeah, we'll see you next year, everyone. Happy New Year.
See you guys.
Folks.
Happy New Year.
Guys, thanks for joining us.